We are now onto our 6th project, which will be the final project for this part of the course, before we move on to taking a look at object-oriented programming. There will be more projects for us to tackle later on, so you'll have plenty of opportunity to put your new skills to the test. For the 6th project, Games Limited want to once again add to their collection of online games. They would like you to produce a version of the popular game Noughts and Crosses, or as some refer to it as Tic Tac Toe. Now hopefully you're already familiar with the game Noughts and Crosses, and you can dive straight into creating a version of this game as you see fit. Now the application should allow 2 players to play the game. You could also code this up where 1 player is playing the computer, but for this version of the game, we want 2 players to be able to play the game. Players take it in turns to place either a nought or a cross on a 3x3 grid, and the player who gets 3 markers in a row, either horizontally, vertically, or diagonally, wins the game. So if this is enough information for you, dive straight into the project. Open a clean notebook, go through the game step by step, and try to get a working solution at the end of it. Now if you feel you still need some guidance at this point, I've broken the application down into the following tasks which may help you complete the project. First of all, you'll need to create a data structure that can store noughts and crosses. And as a clue, you will need to use a structure that contains an ordered sequence for easy accessibility. It would also be good if you can change this structure as the game progresses. Next, we need to write a function that can display the noughts and crosses board. So you'll need to come up with some creative way of being able to print this board to the screen. Thirdly, we need to create a function that allows a player to pick either a cross or a nought as their marker. A player shouldn't be able to play the game with any other marker. Next, we need to create a function that takes in the board, a marker, and a placement position. So this will enable a player to pick and choose where they want to place their marker on the board. Next, we need to create a function that takes in a board and checks to see if one of the players has won. In other words, do we observe markers either horizontally, vertically, or diagonally of one kind? If so, we know that one of the players has won. Next, we want to write a function that returns either player 1 or player 2 as a string, and this will enable us to decide which player goes first. We can then write a function that asks whether the players are ready to play. If they are, we'll return true, and if they're not, we'll return false. And we can provide a message to the screen depending on their response. Now we also want to address the scenario where a player picks a space on the board, but it's already been chosen. In other words, the players can only select a space on the board which is freely available, and we'll need to create a function that can handle this logic. We also need a function that checks to see if the board is full. Now if the board is full, and the function that we write for step 5 does not identify a winner of the game, then we know the game is a draw. We then need a function that asks for a player's next position. Once a player provides this position, we need to check to see if the position is already taken on the board or not. If the space isn't occupied, we can return the position accordingly. We then need to write a function that operates the game. So we need to take input from player 1 and then place their marker on the board. We then need to take input from player 2 so they can place their marker on the board, and so on. And a while loop would come in handy for this type of logic. Once the game has finished, we also want to ask the players if they want to play again. And we've had plenty of practice implementing this kind of logic. And finally, with all the functions defined above, we'll need to use a while loop and the functions we've created to get the game fully operational. So there's a lot to consider when creating a Noughts and Crosses game, but just work through it step by step. What would you do if you were playing Noughts and Crosses with a friend on a piece of paper? Think of the questions that you ask yourself and the actions you perform, and try to replicate it so the computer can perform the exact same thing. Good luck in coding up a solution, and I'll see you in the next video where I'll walk through my thoughts as to how this game can be addressed.